Welcome to my video on sharpening a real mower, an advanced class. Some of you may have seen my initial video on sharpening a real mower. The information I'm presenting here expands on that. The information provided in that video is still valid, but I get into a lot more detail in this video. This video expands on the first video by getting into a lot of the information that I've learned since that video was produced. What I'm trying to do with this video is make the mower cut a little better and give you a little bit less of a workout using the mower. My mower is a great state. It's probably about 30 years old. It's got a few minor problems I'm going to address in this video. So without further ado, let's get into some details and make this old real mower cut a little bit better and make your life a little bit easier. As I'm sure all of you know, there are two adjustment screws to make adjustments for the cut by moving the fixed blade with respect to the rotating blade. The way I found out to best adjust the mower is you make coarse adjustments with the front screw nearest the blade and fine adjustments with the back screw furthest away from the blade. Even 1/16th of a turn in either screw is an extremely major adjustment. As we'll see a little later in the video, you use the front screw to get as close as you possibly can without the blades touching, and then adjust the back screw accordingly to get the proper tension that you want on the blades. First on the list is go ahead and get the wheels off. As you can see here, a narrow blade screwdriver works better than a wide blade for getting this little cover off. Once you pop the cover off, you can take the narrow blade or the wide blade screwdriver and push down or pull up on the little C-clip that holds the wheel on. After that, C-clip falls out, and then you go ahead and pull the tire off. In this case, the little gear also fell out. Don't forget and mix them up. There is a left gear and a right gear. The little pawls that I'm going to be pulling out here shortly, be extra special careful of those that you don't lose them. They're very easy to lose. And again, there's a left way of adjusting it and a right way of adjusting it. You can put it upside down and the mower will skip when you're pushing it. And if you mix up the gears, the mower will either not cut at all or will stop and start as you're cutting. In the case of my mower, I'm on my second set of gears. The first set of gears got kind of beat up because the mower was dull and the inside of the gear was worn down and beat up so it would no longer cut correctly. The first thing I'm going to do on my little motor service is go ahead and take out the 4 adjustment screws. As you can see in this photo, they're a little bit on the rusty side. I was having some problems with them not adjusting freely, and they wanted to stick during adjustments, so it made getting that fine cut adjustment a little bit more difficult. The next thing I'm going to do in my service is to remove the lower fixed blade. It's held in place by 2 bolts, one on either end of the mower, as you can see here, and this will take the blade completely off the mower. And here's a shot of the fixed blade and the adjustment screws. As you can see, the blade's in pretty good shape. It's a little bit rusty because it hadn't been used in a little while. Okay, and here's the lower fixed blade as it came directly off the mower. You can see it's in, again, pretty good shape. A little bit of rust on the blade. No obvious defects in the blade. Next thing I want to do is check the blade for straightness. And as you can see here, it's definitely pretty straight. Overall, again, this thing's in pretty good shape for being 30 years old. Next thing I've done is gone ahead and take all the adjustment screws and treat them to my wire brush on my grinder to remove any trace of rust. Now, to eliminate any future rusting issues and make the screws move easier, I'm going to coat them thoroughly with the anti-seize. I am not putting any anti-seize on the lower bolts that hold the fixed blade in place. I want those to remain real good and tight. By doing this, I'm definitely going to be able to get a little finer adjustment with these screws. And here's a shot of that same fixed blade after I've treated it to the wire brush and just brushed it down real good. Reinstalling the lower fixed blade is not near of a challenge as you think it might be. There are 2 locating tabs on either side to make the blade go in pretty close to where it's got to be. Once these are engaged, your adjustment is kind of limited. That's fine because it's exactly what you want. What I'm doing here is I've adjusted the mower to where it's just barely touching on the left side and then backed off just a little bit. I found out that 2 blades were catching the tips. When the mower caught the tips, of course, if you happened to stop at just that blade, it was difficult to make the mower start again because you had to break over that blade. So what I'm doing here is just rounding them off, just that last 1/8 inch or so. In this shot, both the main fixed blade and the adjustment screws have been reinstalled in the mower. I'm going to adjust the screws down to just barely contact the blade. Once I've got the adjustment screws set to where the blade just barely clears and there's no contact between the rotating assembly and the fixed assembly, I'm going to gradually tighten up on the back screw to bring the blades closer together. As I do this, I'm rotating the rotating assembly by hand, slowly but surely. What I'm looking for is a tall blade. I'm also checking to make sure my little end adjustments where I had the blade tip catching have been fixed. Once you find out that you have a tall blade, the best thing to do is to mark that blade. That's the one you pay extra special attention to with the sharpening compound when you put on the compound. This is one of those painstakingly slow processes since you're only making adjustments of a few thousandths of an inch. The whole trick is to get it where the blades don't touch, and then with a very slight adjustment the blades do touch. And especially you want to know if there are tall blades in there that need to be ground down a little bit more. Once you can rotate the blade assembly and you can see that all the blades appear to be fairly close, maybe a couple of them are a little bit tight, now you can proceed to work into the sharpening compound episode. Don't rush into this. You want to make sure the blades are contacting evenly all across the fixed blade. Your final adjustment before sharpening should be that the blades have an absolute minimum amount of contacts. Okay, let's talk sharpening compounds and compound sharpening kits. This particular one is a Home Depot kit. It consists of a little brush, the sharpening compound, and a manual handle to rotate the reel. Several mower manufacturers offer these kits. They're usually geared towards specific mowers. This Home Depot kit claims to be good for all your common reel mowers. Simple, one-shot shopping. This may indeed be the best approach for a homeowner with a small yard that only sharpens his reel mower once a year. This is a kit from Pin High. It can be ordered from their website. It consists of a brush, a 1-pound tub of 80 grit, and a 1-pound tub of 120 grit. If your mower is in pretty bad shape and you haven't sharpened it for some time, you probably want to start out making several passes and several sharpening rounds with 80 grit before you consider moving on to 120. The 120 grit, most websites seem to indicate, gives you a much cleaner, smoother cut to your lawn. Makes the mower easier to push, of course, since it's sharper. Your waste is going to be a little bit higher since you're using it with a brush, but a little 1-pound tub of this stuff should last your average homeowner a lifetime. Another manufacturer is Promo. These two manufacturers are primarily geared for large commercial applications like golf courses where you're towing several different reels behind a tractor and mowing a large golf course. Obviously, they're going to go through a whole lot more sharpening compound with those large 8-inch reels than you will with your 4 or 5-inch reel in your house. You can buy these sharpening compounds in fairly large quantities like 5-pound tubs, of course, which is what you'd want for a golf course. For your average homeowner, one of these kits could be pretty expensive, even with shipping. So it depends really on how often you use your mower. Now, for my money, I'm planning on sticking with the valve grinding compounds, which you can find at any auto parts store. Permatex sells their offering in 2 tube sizes. One is 1.5 ounce and the other is 3 ounce. For a homeowner, I'd go ahead and buy the 3 ounce tube size. Probably last you 5 or 10 years at least. The reason I like the tube style is it's much easier to put on the blade. If you punch a little small hole in the end of the tube, you can really squeeze out a really fine film across the blade. Should save a lot of material waste and make that tube go a long way. Now, Permatex does not give the grit number for their particular valve lapping compounds, but according to an inquiry, their compound starts at 120 grit and goes to 220 grit. Since it's used in an automotive application for lapping valves, it works its way in, is what they would say. The more you use it, the finer the grit is. Now, for we homeowners using it to sharpen a real mower, this doesn't really apply because you really only get one pass, which means, of course, it's basically 120 grit. Now, as to what you do if you've got an old mower or one that hasn't been sharpened in a while, and you need to find out where the high and the low spots are on the reel, you can get you a tube of this stuff, put it on the edge of the reels, just like you would the sharpening compound, and then go out and either mow the driveway or do it with an electric drill, and you should be able to tell where the high spots are on your reels. Now, virtually nobody does, but if you wanted to, you could go ahead and proceed to even get a sharper cutting edge on your blades. As you can see here, you can get your grits all the way up to a 1200. That basically would be like a mirror finish on the edge of your mower. Can't see a logical reason you want to do that, but the option is there. And now comes the time we've all been waiting for, actually putting the sharpening compound on the blades. As you can see here, I prefer the toothpaste tube approach. My one mistake in this case was to punch too large of a hole in the end of the tube. That means I get a little bit more out than I should. If you punch a real small hole and do a real gentle squeeze, you can lay a nice bead right on top of the blade as you go right across, and it'll work out perfectly. No mess, no fuss, just a perfect little bead right up on top of the blade. Then as you go, proceed all the way through the first blade you're working on, then move on to the next blade to get the entire mower covered. While you're doing this, probably best to go ahead and rotate the mower backwards in the sharpening direction rather than forwards in the mowing direction. And now for the actual sharpening. You got really three options. Of course, you can buy a kit with a crank on it and hand crank the reel. You could reassemble the mower backwards by swapping the gears on the inside, putting in the paws upside down, and basically running the mower backwards. Or you can do what I'm doing here. Take a 1/2-inch drill, chuck it up, then run the blade backwards at high speed. I like this because it's both quick and it's very efficient. You can literally, if you have the blades adjusted right, you'll hear the tone change in the mower as the blades get sharper. It'll go from mechanical clank to almost a whooshing sound as the blades run in. Always wear a face shield. Never stand in front or behind the mower. Make sure there are no kids and pets anywhere near you when you are doing this. Now, if you got the blades adjusted right, of course, you'll hear it run in when the blades get sharp, and you only have to do this once. And one more thing, it is indeed quite loud. You're definitely going to wear some hearing protection when you're doing this. That blade thrashing noise is pretty loud. Depending on how sharp the blades are, you may have to do 2 or 3 passes doing this. By that I mean the first pass is you put the compound on, run the drill until you hear the tone change, stop, clean off the compound, reapply new compound to the blades, and then make a second run. It's entirely possible, of course, you may decide to use 80 compound followed up by 120 compound to get a better cut. Once you've made your final sharpening pass, stop, then of course go ahead and rotate the reels by hand to make sure they look pretty good as far as being about equal. Then clean off the compound first off the rotating blades and then off the fixed blade. As you manually rotate the blades on the mower, look at the blade surfaces and make sure it looks like they've got a uniform appearance across the blades, meaning that they're in constant contact with the fixed blade all the way across the blade. Once you got everything clean, now's the time for your fixed final adjustment. What you want to do is try to use the back screw, hopefully the front screw is real close, to make the adjustment to move the blades where they just barely miss. You want them as close as possible without touching. This may take several tries. Rotate the reel around as you go and keep making your little small adjustments until the blades just miss. Once you feel comfortable with this, again, rotate the blades several times to make sure it all looks good. Do a final tightening on the 2 bolts that hold the fixed blade in place. Then you'll have to do a final adjustment on the 2 screws for making the blade adjustments. Probably going to have to go ahead and loosen them up slightly, but once you do, you want to tighten down both the front and rear screws to get the exact just miss situation I've outlined before. Okay, now it's time to actually reassemble little drive gears. Number one, don't put any grease on the inside of this little cam action. Of course, the rotary portion or the gear portion you can grease as you'd like. Now, when it comes to the little shuttle pawls that actually go through the shaft, you ought to always remember that the flat side goes with the flat side on the inside of a little gear, and the rounded side goes with the more rounded side of the inside of the little gear. Okay, now the next step, of course, is the assembly. Go ahead and slip your little pawl in the right direction, slide the gear over top of it. Then you want to go back and do a test rotate, a twisting on the little gear to make sure that the blade rotates in the correct direction. You also want to run the blade in the reverse direction to make sure that it freewheels. And now we come to the last little item on our mower reassembly project, putting the C-clips back in. Yes, these things can be kind of a pain in the butt. They tend to fall out, as you noticed here, just even trying to get one started. What you got to do basically is just hold it in place, then stick a large bladed flat screwdriver back in behind it, and then simply twist. Once you twist it in place, it should pop right in. Sometimes you got to take it and tap it a little bit to get the screwdriver to finally seat home. But I found by far this is the best way to put the little C-clips back in. Once these are in, basically, project's done. And now I'm pretty sure I heard someone say, okay, so how well does it cut? I believe this will pretty well answer that question. Well, thanks for dropping by. Hope you enjoyed the video and learned something useful. If you found it useful, how about giving me a like and consider subscribing? I just might have something else come along here real soon you're going to want to see. So until the time when our paths cross again, take care. Thanks for dropping by. Y'all have a good day now, yeah?